Here are my top 3 creepiest things found underwater. We're starting things off with a dive into the Caribbean Sea off the west coast of Grenada, West Indies. Here, nestled in the depths of Molinari Bay, is an underwater garden of contemporary sculptures. This eerie exhibition was the brainchild of British sculptor Jason Decatur Taylor, who back in 2006 boldly chose the ocean bed as his gallery. With solitary figures and a circle of children holding hands cast in concrete, this was the world's first underwater sculpture park. A year later, he added The Fall from Grace, a haunting piece depicting a man on a bicycle, submerged 21 feet under the sea. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Next, we plunge further into the abyss to Chuuk Lagoon, a watery grave located around 1,800 kilometers northeast of New Guinea. This site is a chilling reminder of World War II, its ocean floor littered with the remnants of fleet carriers, aircrafts, and even a tank. Once Japan's main base in the South Pacific, it became the final resting place for more than 50 warships after a relentless 2-day attack by America in 1944. Today, the people of Japan pay their respects by diving to this sunken cemetery. Finally, the creepiest of them all, the Bilbao River Drowning Girl sculpture. Off Spain's northern coast, this 120-kilogram fiberglass figure is the work of Mexican hyper-realist artist Ruben Orozco Loza. Crafted over 3 months and secretly installed in the river, this sculpture of a girl emerges and disappears with the tide, a haunting spectacle that has alarmed locals. Created in Mexico and titled Bihar, or Tomorrow in Basque, the sculpture was flown to Bilbao in 8 pieces, assembled and brought to the river by boat, anchored by a 3.5-ton steel structure. Its eerie presence is believed to symbolize the looming threat of global warming. What do you think? Let me know in the comments and please subscribe. Thank you. In August 2011, a 49-year-old unemployed man named Wayne Sabaj from Johnsburg in McHenry County, Illinois, was at his home gardening when he stumbled across his dream find. Wayne had previously been a carpenter, but had been out of work for 2 years and was living off benefits, struggling to support himself financially. So when he unearthed $150,000, he was over the moon. Wayne carefully pushed back the surrounding plants and broccoli and hoisted out a nylon duffel bag stuffed with $20 bills from the ground. Wayne showed his father and assumed the money must be stolen, therefore, after some deliberation, decided to alert the authorities in case they started spending it and got arrested. Oddly enough, the police advised Wayne that if nobody claimed the money within the next 18 months, he may be able to keep it. And this is where the story gets beyond creepy. Wayne had been waiting patiently for the year 2012 to end, so that he would learn if anybody had claimed the money, or whether he may become a beneficiary of the loot. A year passed, and nobody had come forward, so Wayne was getting excited about inheriting the cash. Not long before the deadline was up, Wayne's 87-year-old neighbor Dolores Johnson, who had clearly had a bad bout of amnesia, suddenly claimed that the money was hers, but had buried it because it was cursed. A liquor store in Naperville also came forward, but both stories could not be verified, and therefore Wayne remained in pole position for the funds. Just 10 days before Wayne was due to take ownership of the money, he died from a complicated issue involving diabetes. He was buried in Lutheran Church of All Saints in Spring Grove. Wayne's neighbor Dolores remained adamant that the money was cursed, and a few months later she also passed away. Her death was initially suspected to have been from dementia, but something did not seem right. Still, nobody had come forward to claim the money with a story that could be evidenced, and so Wayne's daughter and his father legally became the owners of the money in court. Within a week of being nurtured on this news, Wayne's father was hospitalized following a cardiac arrest, and Wayne's daughter appears to have gone missing. Do you think the money was cursed? Do you have a theory of your own? In New Manila, Quezon City, the Philippines, you will find a 2-lane street named Balete Drive that connects Nicanor Domingo Street in Quezon City and Eulogio Rodriguez Sr. Avenue. On either side of this road, there are a large number of sizable balete trees, and the area is busy with food outlets and an array of other establishments close to the San Juan Reservoir. The trees are believed to have been there before the road, which was created in the early 1970s and has some famous Spanish houses such as the Centennial House on its route. The arching of the large balete trees is said to darken the road, making it particularly spooky for the people of Manila. What's so scary about this video, you ask? Well, in Philippine folklore, the balete trees are alleged to be the home of spirits and mysterious creatures, and this street is no exception to that. Rumors have been spoken of about the street being haunted since soon after it was built, as if somehow those that made the road had possibly disturbed something evil. The stories we are about to share all describe the ghost of a white lady known as a caparosa, which is a long-standing character of Philippine folklore. The caparosa is said to be haunting taxi drivers for eternity. One theory is that a teenage girl who attended the University of the Philippines was assaulted and killed by a taxi driver, and they buried her body by a balay tree on Balete Drive. And so her spirit roams at night looking for her murderer. Another theory claims a female occupier of one of the mansions along Balete Drive was abused by her own family, who eventually killed her, and that it is her spirit that haunts the street looking for help from passers-by. So, who and what exactly have people seen? There are numerous reports of sightings of a pale and ghostly white lady that is usually seen at night. Some have witnessed this lady simply obliviously crossing the road before vanishing into thin air, yet some reports are even more sinister. Whilst some have seen the lady on the side of the road looking upset, it is alleged that a handful of people have actually offered to give the lady a lift. Only once she gets inside the car, she disappears without a trace. Do you believe in this? In 1994, a woman was admitted to an emergency room as she was in severe pain. Following her treatment later that evening, the woman sadly passed away. But in a creepy twist, 23 of the doctors suddenly became ill, 5 of which were hospitalized. So what happened? Let's find out. Gloria Cecilia Ramirez, born on the 11th of January 1963, lived in California and unfortunately had late-stage cervical cancer. On the evening of February 19, 1994, Gloria was suffering from severe heart palpitations and quickly got herself admitted to the Riverside General Hospital. It was documented that Gloria appeared to be extremely confused and also had an oily material covering her body that smelled of ammonia, and there was a fruit and garlic-like smell coming from her breath. She had been suffering with tachycardia and Cheney-Stokes respiration. Medical staff began treating Gloria by sedating her with diazepam, midazolam, and lorazepam. But sadly, after almost an hour of CPR, she passed away from complications related to her cancer. Within moments of treating Gloria, medical staff began feeling unwell and even passing out. Others contracted a shortness of breath and muscle spasms. It's reported that 23 individuals became sick, and 5 of them were in such poor condition that they had to be hospitalized. One of the medical experts by the name of Gorchinsky had to endure 2 weeks in an intensive care unit, which resulted in hepatitis and a vascular necrosis in her knees. This started when a medical resident spotted yellow and brown particles floating in Gloria's blood, causing a doctor by the name of Kane to faint and be removed from the medical room. Soon after, another medical expert became nauseated and lightheaded and had to leave the room. Next, a respiratory therapist named Maureen Welch fainted. By this point, enough was enough and the room was evacuated. They also fainted soon after leaving the room. Gloria was dubbed the toxic lady or toxic woman by media outlets, as those that became sick were believed to have been exposed to an airborne disease to their body and blood and led to mass hysteria. An investigation soon got underway, and it was alleged that Gloria had been self-administering dimethyl sulfoxide to control her pain, which converted into dimethyl sulfate, which is extremely poisonous. A report confirmed that the dimethyl sulfoxide and dimethyl sulfate reaction is what made medical staff feel unwell, and it had built up inside Gloria, owing to a urinary blockage caused by her kidney failure. Gloria's family disagreed with this, and 2 months after her death, her body was released for an autopsy and formal burial. Gloria's family pathologist was unable to definitively determine her cause of death because her heart was missing, and her other organs had been contaminated with fecal matter, making her decomposition too severe to investigate further. Almost 3 months later, on the 20th of April 1994, Gloria was finally laid to rest at Olivewood Memorial Park in Riverside.
In 1946, an 8-year-old girl was swimming in a state park when she suddenly vanished from her father's eyesight. After an extensive search and rescue operation of the water and woods, the girl could not be found and was assumed to be dead. A week later, 7 birdseye miles away, or a 30-mile hike, the girl was found alive in a cave, still in her swimming costume and barefoot. What happened? Let's find out more in this video, and please subscribe, thank you. On the 14th of June, 1946, Catherine Van Aarst, an 8-year-old girl, went to Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas, with her father and 2 brothers. The park was a hotbed for tourists, and located near West Fork, containing 2,500 acres of wilderness. Families would come here for an array of activities, such as hiking, camping, picnics, and horse riding, and often explore the landscape for caves, shelters, and fossils. On this day, Catherine was goofing around in a creek near the family's campsite, whilst her father and 2 brothers were fishing very close by. Her vigilant father kept a close eye on Catherine whilst he also attended to his son's fishing. It is alleged that Catherine's father looked away from her for a split second, turned back round, and saw she was no longer there. Without a yell for help, or sign of a struggle, Catherine's father assumed that she must have returned to their camp, which was a spit throw away, but to his distress, young Catherine was not there, and obtained 0 response when he called out for her. Catherine's father and her 2 brothers began frantically searching for her, but eventually had to call in park officials to perform a large-scale search. A rescue team searched for miles in and around the creek area, the woodlands, caves, and trails, but Catherine could not be found. Every moment that passed was critical to find the missing 8-year-old girl in bare foot, wearing only a swimming costume. With the assistance of volunteers, the rescue operation continued, but Catherine still could not be found. Approaching the end of day 6 of the search, a team of volunteers were scanning the forest, when they crossed paths with an eerie-looking cave, and went inside to check for Catherine on the off chance she had taken shelter. As they approached the cave, they were shocked at what they saw. 8-year-old Catherine Van Arst was casually waving at them. Catherine remained without any footwear, and in her swimming costume. The volunteers reported that she was spookily calm, and appeared not to be fazed by what had happened. It was like she was in a severe daze or trance, and sent chills down the volunteers' spines when Catherine said, "Here I am." The cave at which Catherine was found was not just 7 straight miles away, but was 600 feet higher than her place of disappearance, and to have gotten there on foot would have been a 30-plus mile hike, meandering around rugged terrain. In essence, to have made it this far away from the creek through such steep and thick forest, with no footwear, food, or navigation instruments, as an 8-year-old girl wearing only a swimsuit, and being found alive 6 days later, following cold temperatures at night, was pushing the boundaries of impossible. Although Catherine's feet were particularly swollen as you would have expected, and was also caked in insect bites, she was ultimately fine barring signs of undernourishment. The cave that Catherine was found in also contained a fresh water spring. Aircraft and sniffer dogs had previously searched this area for Catherine, but to no avail, which further added to the mind-blowing circumstances of her disappearance. This is only the beginning of the strangeness surrounding this reappearance. Unexplained disappearances in North America are not that uncommon, but reappearances are memorably rare. Catherine claims to have no knowledge on the 6 days she was missing, apart from eating some berries to stay alive, then waking up in the cave. The area Catherine would have passed through is notorious for poisonous berries, yet with no outdoor experience, Catherine somehow knew which ones she could eat. Catherine also alleges that she couldn't find her family's campsite, despite being right next to it, and that when she called out to rescuers looking for her, they didn't hear her. Another scary part of this story is that Catherine claims she saw the sniffer dogs, but she was too afraid of them to introduce herself. This incident has naturally led to wild explanations, ranging from Catherine being away from her family by a sick individual with ill intent, to unexplained forces such as a UFO, as this particular area was once terrifying due to spirits and local tribes. Most of their theories have been rejected or debunked, and so, the question remains, how did an 8-year-old girl in a swimsuit with no shoes, no food, no survival skills, vanish from a creek next to her camp, only to be discovered 6 days later, alive and well in a cave over 30 hiking miles away? Do you have a theory? If so, please let me know in the comments, and please subscribe. Thank you.
In Scotland, there is a peculiar 19th century Gothic bridge that numerous sane and happy dogs have intentionally leapt off, in what is believed to be an act of suicide. Hundreds of dogs have very suddenly decided to jump off the tall structure, and in more than 50 of those cases the dogs died. Some that didn't fall to their death even headed back for a second attempt. But why? Let's find out more in this video. Overtoun Bridge, also known as Bridge of Death or Dog Suicide Bridge, is a listed structure that stands over the Overtoun Burn, which is a small river near Dumbarton in Scotland. The bridge was constructed at the request of John Campbell White, who inherited Overtoun House in 1884 and wished to extend his driveway, but couldn't due to the large ravine in the way. In order to overcome the deep ravine and create access, Landscape architect Henry Milner designed Overtoun Bridge, and it was completed in June 1895 using rough-faced ashlar. The structure comprises of a large central arch, which spans across the Overtoun burn, with 2 additional arches symmetrical to each side of the main arch, and looks quite impressive. Since the 1950s, there have been hundreds of reported cases of happy and healthy dogs either accidentally falling from or deliberately jumping off of the bridge. The poor dogs often received serious injuries or death as they landed on the jagged rocks some 52 feet below the bridge. Due to the number of dog incidents that had occurred on Overtoun Bridge, it became known by the locals as the Bridge of Death, or the Dog Suicide Bridge, by the late 1950s, clueless as to why the dogs had been acting this way. Dogs are highly intelligent animals and pets, and simply would not intentionally jump to their almost certain death. Not in the numbers this bridge has witnessed anyway. Even if a dog was depressed, their natural instinct would not be to jump off a bridge, let alone hundreds of them. And why this particular bridge? Let's hear about some of these incidents in more detail to see if we can spot a trend, or find out what's behind the mystery. In 2004, a man named Kenneth Michael was taking a casual walk with his family and their dog, a golden retriever. Kenneth advised that the dog suddenly, and without reason, charged towards and off of the bridge. Thankfully, the golden retriever survived, but naturally it became traumatized by the ordeal. In 2005, at least 5 dogs again, all healthy and well, jumped off the bridge within 6 months of each other. In 2014, a Springer Spaniel named Cassie was out walking with her owner, Alice Trevorrow, when something strange happened. Alice said, and I quote, "I had parked up, and as Cassie is so obedient, I didn't put her lead on. Me and my son walked toward Cassie, who was staring at something above the bridge. She definitely saw something that made her jump. There is something sinister going on. It was so out of character for her." Ownership of Overtoun House changed hands in 2002, when Bob and Melissa Hill decided to purchase it. In 2019, after being residents at the property for 17 years, Bob and Melissa spoke about how they witnessed a number of dogs becoming agitated at the bridge and falling off. Bob said, and again I quote, "The dogs catch the scent of mink, pine martens, or some other mammal, and then they will jump up on the wall of the bridge, and because it's tapered, they will just topple over." Bob was originally a pastor from Texas, and yet he believed that the grounds around his property were possessed by some sort of spiritual quality. A host of theories have tried to justify the dog's strange behavior, and in 2014, a canine psychologist named David Sands backed Bob Hill's theory concerning the odor from a male mink's urine could be luring dogs to jump off the bridge. However, this theory was debunked by a local hunter named John Joyce, who had been a local resident of over 50 years, as he claimed there were no minks in the area. The theory does, however, hold substance, as an experiment was set up with 3 canisters, one containing mice odor, one with squirrel odor, and one with mink odor. During the experiment, 7 of the 10 dogs dramatically ran directly to the canister containing mink odor. Another suggestion is that a noise the human ear cannot detect is playing havoc with dogs' highly attuned hearing capabilities, and that if humans could hear it, there would be an even bigger problem. And another theory offered is that this exact spot is where heaven and hell meets. There was also one human fatality experienced at the Overtoun Bridge. In October 1994, an alleged paranoid schizophrenic named Kevin Moy, aged 32, tragically launched his 2-week-old son Owen off the bridge, and he plummeted off the edge. Owen survived the initial fall, but sadly died the next day due to his injuries. Kevin believed that his son was a reincarnation of the devil or Antichrist due to his unusual birthmark, which appeared to be no dissimilar to anybody else's. Kevin had intentionally chosen this spot due to its infamous association with evil dating back to the Druidic days. Subsequent to the killing, Kevin attempted to take his own life, but was captured and thrown in a mental health hospital. Locals still feel that supernatural activity surrounds Overtoun Bridge, but what is luring dogs to their demise? Would you dare to take your dog for a walk on the wild side?
Here are 3 spooky coincidences that will have you question your luck, so let's get into it, and please subscribe for more eerie stuff, thank you. Number 3, we'll start off simple, with a man named Jacob Daniel Du Toit, born in February 1877, who was a South African man with interests in science and poetry. In 1900, Jacob received a doctor's degree, and successfully carved out a career for himself and also got married in 1903. Jacob also became a professor, and retired in 1949. In 1953, at the age of 76, Jacob was giving a lecture about how death can occur at any time. During this class, he sat down to eat a boiled sweet called a peppermint lolly, and choked to his demise there and then. Shall we go much more coincidental? You got it. Number 2. A lady that cheated death 3 times. Violet Constance Jessup, born in 1887, was an ocean liner stewardess in the early 1900s. It would transpire that she had been working on 3 of the most doomed ocean liners in history, and outlived all 3. In 1911, Violet was working on the luxury cruise liner HMS Olympic, which collided with a British warship. The vessel did not sink, and fortunately Violet made it back to port. In 1912, Violet continued her work aged 24, on the HMS Olympic's sister ship the Titanic, that is possibly referred to as the Olympic, but that's another video. The Titanic struck an iceberg on April 14 and sank 2.5 hours later. Whilst sinking, Violet was handed a random baby and got into a lifeboat. She was then rescued by RMS Carpathia the following day. We can't tell you what happened to the baby, but Violet was one of only 705 of the 2,208 people on board the Titanic that survived. Undeterred by catching 2 lucky breaks, Violet went to work on the HMHS Britannic in November 1916, as a stewardess for the British Red Cross during World War I, and not to mention this was also the younger sister ship of the doomed Olympic and Titanic, that Violet had previously worked on. After detonating a German naval mine, the converted hospital ship began sinking, and killed 30 of the 1,066 people on board. Violet and her death wish continued to work on ocean liners until she retired in 1950, and passed away aged 83 in 1971 of heart failure. And at number 1, this story truly will have you believing in fate. In 1861, a man named Henry Zeekland, sometimes referred to as Harry, was a farmer from Texas. In 1878, Henry was courting a lady named Charla Karras. He fell head over heels in love with her, quickly moved in with Charla, and even gave her brother, James Karras, his farm. It was all going super well. In 1883, having been dating Charla for 5 years, Henry walked out on her, leading Charla to become very depressed and in turn ended her own life. Charla's brother James was so outraged by this, he decided to kill Henry, but then things get creepy. Whilst Henry was in the barn feeding his horses, James sneaked up behind him with a gun, and proceeded to shoot Henry. The shot only grazed Henry's cheek, and the bullet continued on to hit a tree. Henry pretended to be dead, and by this point James believed he had killed Henry, and proceeded to shoot himself in the head, and we haven't even got to the twist yet. Henry had survived the shooting, and 20 years passed without incident, until 1903, when Henry needed to move a large tree. The tree was too big and round to cut with an axe, and so Henry decided to use dynamite to take it down. He strapped the explosives to the tree, lit it, and boom. The tree exploded as expected, but the bullet James had used to shoot Henry and got lodged in the tree 2 decades earlier, burst out and ended up in the head of Henry, killing him immediately. The bullet was confirmed to be the very same that grazed Henry's cheek. The odds on this happening are unbelievable.
In 2004, French police were performing a training exercise deep in the spooky catacombs of Paris, when they discovered a room containing a cinema screen, a bar and a telephone. Puzzled by the find, the police officers headed back to notify their peers, but when they returned, the electricity had been cut, all evidence of the room had been removed, and only a warning note had been left. So who and why? Let's find out more. The Paris catacombs are a large network of underground passages that house the remains of at least 6 million people due to the overflow of cemeteries. In 1981, a group named Urban Experiment, or UX for short, was formed. The group was a top-secret society in Paris that stole blueprints for a large number of the catacombs' underground tunnels and passageways. It is alleged that the group of unnamed artists and anonymous persons are responsible for improvements made to underground infrastructure by refurbishing medieval crypts and laying on plays at night. The group is believed to be split into various teams, including an all-female team who take care of coded messages, a database team, an underground plays theme, a photography team, and a restoration team. Parisian authorities took a disliking to the group's actions, and unsurprisingly, they started a police unit to dive into the old sewers and catacombs of Paris in order to put a stop to their harmless fun.
because the group was responsible for over a dozen other projects that included restoration or repair for things the French government had not chosen to do, presumably due to cost. But it made them look bad. So one day in 2004, instead of catching real criminals, French police as puppets under the dictatorship of globalists, were manipulated into entering the catacombs and deliver back some hard results to their masters. As a couple of officers were on a trek along one of the bone-littered pathways, their torches stopped them at a large sign which was preventing them from passing. The sign read, "No access." Undeterred by this, the officers had a job to do and ignored the sign. Then they came across something they did not expect to see. Once the officers had bypassed the sign, they were greeted by an automated camera that had been set up to record anybody ignoring the sign's advice. In addition, a tape recorder playing the sound of guard dogs barking began to scare off intruders. Possibly a little spooked by this, the officers still continued to head deeper into the tunnel until it opened up into a larger room. What they saw next really did stump them. Instead of finding yet more bones, the officers had walked into an empty bar fully stocked with drinks and stone bar stools in a side cave. But that wasn't all they had found. The room was wired with electricity, had an active phone line installed, and contained a giant cinema screen with all sorts of other recording equipment. It is believed that the urban explorers of the hidden corner of Paris had been hosting cinema nights, which nobody is allowed to talk about. After looking around the secret cinema, the officers returned to daylight to report back to their peers. 2 or 3 days later, the police officers returned with reinforcements to investigate further, only the venue had vanished. Whilst officers were sure they were in the right spot of the catacombs, their images had surely been seen by UX,
who had removed all their electrical equipment, the telephone, the bar, and all signs that anything had ever existed there. One of the officers soon realized that he was definitely in the right place when he stumbled across a note on the floor that read, "Do not try to find us." An arm of UX named Le Mexicain de Perforation are alleged to be responsible for this, and also claim there are many more of these cinemas out there that have not yet been discovered. Would you head into a cave full of real bones to watch a movie, and not just to avoid taking out a mortgage to fund a hot dog?
In 1978, some young children in America were playing in some dirt when they discovered a Ferrari worth at least $15,000 buried in their garden. A few questions to answer here, so let's find out more. In January 1978, a few children were reported to have been playing in the mud and dirt of a yard in Los Angeles when they noticed something sticking out of the ground and began digging it up. To their surprise, they had discovered a 1974 Ferrari Dino 246 GTS, which at the time was believed to be valued at $15,000. This particular model was in competition with the Porsche 911 at the time and considered to be collector's items. Neither the tenants of the property or the homeowner knew anything about the Ferrari or its burial. Instead of hoarding their treasure, the car was notified to police, and Joe Sabas and Dennis Carroll attended the home for a closer inspection. The incident remained a mystery for some time, until police discovered that the Ferrari in question had been reported stolen in 1974, and due to the threat of it being found, the thieves had buried the vehicle, with the plan of retrieving it at a later date. The Ferrari had been preserved by wrapping it in carpets and placing rags between the gaps in windows to stop soil penetrating the inside. Unfortunately, the windows had been left open, but barring a small hole on the right taillight, the Ferrari was in surprisingly great condition. The thieves who buried the Ferrari had stupidly forgotten where they buried it, and hence it remained where it was. So why bury it in the first place? It would later transpire that the owner of the vehicle, a plumber named Rosendo Cruz, had hired some goons to commit insurance fraud a month after he had taken ownership. The thieves were hired to take the Ferrari to a chop shop and have it disassembled for the resale of parts. But the thieves had their own agenda and decided to bury it to make a quick buck once the heat had died down. Rosendo did receive his insurance money. The Ferrari was restored by an expert named Giuseppe Capolonga, and a real estate businessman named Brad Howard purchased it for an undisclosed sum later in 1978. Between 1978 and 2019, the vehicle was driven regularly and was even entered into some classic car races. If you can find one of these models for sale in 2024, you could be looking at a purchase price upwards of $60,000. If you found this car in your garden, would you notify the police? Be honest and let me know in the comments. In 2019, a person wearing a vintage television set on their head began delivering old TV sets late one night to a neighborhood in Virginia. Who was it, and why did they do it? Let's find out more in this video. In Henrico and Glen Allen County, Virginia, on the 11th of August 2019, a peculiar incident happened one evening, leaving residents and police baffled. More than 50 households awoke to find an 80s or 90s square box-style TV on their doorsteps. If this wasn't enough to make locals feel alarmed and brick up their porches, footage of the unknown delivery person was captured on various home security systems, showing the courier wearing a smaller box-style TV on their head like a motorcycle helmet. This must have felt like the Twilight Zone or an episode of Black Mirror. Each television set was left on the front porch facing the front door, like some sort of modern-day unhinged ritual. Another resident claims to have seen the delivery person walking off of their property when they looked back, saw the resident looking out of their window, and waved to them before disappearing. Police were notified and found this incident to be a huge inconvenience, as telephone calls jammed their switchboards, but ultimately felt that there was no credible threat to residents. After collating notes from over 50 households, it became clear that this was not the work of one individual, given physical descriptions and the time of delivery. One delivery shows a person in a blue jumpsuit and hiking boots, and another in a white jumpsuit. Nobody had been injured, and the police used a state truck to collect all of the television sets for recycling. This evening was an isolated event, and has not happened since. 3 weeks after the event, police believed they knew who the mysterious TV head was and set out to arrest them, but they could not be found at their address. The suspect is alleged to be an unnamed 19-year-old male that would have been arrested for dumping trash, trespassing, and wearing a mask in public. Why this person remains unnamed and why no motive has been divulged remains a mystery. As for the second person, they are believed to be the 19-year-old man in question's sister. No other leads have been identified. Would you be scared of a complete stranger with a TV on their head, dumping retro technology on your doorstep in the middle of the night? Does anybody watching this know something I don't? Please let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Please subscribe.